Hey everyone, how we doing today? This is James Sweeney, aka SplitSuit, and welcome back to another video. And as part of the Ask SplitSuit a Question series, a bunch of people had hand history questions, and today's question comes from Tadeas. And Tadeas just wants me to review this hand played with pocket jacks at 25 no limit. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Okay, so in this hand, there's a raise under the gun, there's a call, there's a squeeze, and it's back to us. So Tadeas prefaces the hand by saying, I have jacks under the gun and make a standard raise, there's a call, and a squeeze from a player I only have 20 hands on, and he's played quite tight so far, but the reality can differ greatly. First and foremost, Tadeas, it's excellent that you recognize that 20 hands is not a great sample size, and there's going to be a lot of variance, especially in things like playstyle. Tadeas goes on to say, I consider him to be rather fishy because of his stack, but the sizing of his squeeze seems okay. I really only think of calling here as I think folding is too nitty, but stack off is too optimistic. So there are a bunch of things in that write-up that I really agree with. Yes, 20 hands is not a huge sample size. There's going to be a bunch of variance in playstyle as far as the stats are concerned. 2, he did not start the hand with a full stack, so yeah, I agree starting with 80 big blinds is a little bit odd and not necessarily something that I think a great player would do. Yes, I agree that his squeeze size is totally fine, and then I also agree that I think folding is too nitty. Now, just because folding is too nitty does not necessarily mean that I have to call simply because stacking off is, and I quote, too optimistic. So let's think real quick about what we have here. We have a 6-max game, we raised, and someone decided to squeeze on the button. Does that mean that that person only has the nuts or a super nuttish range when they squeeze? I don't think so. I don't think there's any reason to think that that's the case here. So because of that, I'm not thinking about folding. And then I question, okay, if I call, what happens? Well, if we decide to call like Hero did, we're giving Chicken Dinner a great price, plus he's closing action, and we're essentially allowing him to actualize any chunk of his equity with things like pocket 4s, pocket 8s, suited connectors, ace 10, all that kind of stuff. And usually I don't want to just allow people to actualize equity for very, very cheap against me. So I don't particularly love flatting and just letting him get involved, and now all of a sudden we're out of position in a 3-way pot that's going to be pretty awkward and bloated and just not really where I think my edge is going to lie. Which then pushes me back to really hardcore exploring the 4-bet. So you can actually proof the exact value of a 4-bet commit mindset by using a fold equity calculator. We've done that a bunch in other videos, so I'm not going to go through it here. I think at this point it's just kind of becoming repetitive math. But you can definitely proof it if you wanted to. But in this situation, I would just think about it and say, okay, Zachu probably doesn't just have the nuts. First and foremost, it's 6-max. Secondly, I don't think there's any reason to think that he only has like kings plus or queens plus ace king here. I think there's going to be other stuff in there. And just for the record, when he does have something like queens plus ace king, if we do decide to commit it, if we just do a basic equity calculation, Jack still has 36% equity against that. And if we think there's any percentage chance that Zachu is going to commit with a wider range, let's say 10s plus, ace queen plus, then you notice that our equity just gets higher and higher. So this is not a situation where I'm considering trying to like get away from this by any stretch. And I think there's a lot of value actually in just fighting for this, right? There's already $5 in the middle. That's 20 big blinds that we can start contending for right this moment. If there's any shade at all in Zachu's range, things that would squeeze and then fold, then we're just picking up $5 uncontested that chunk of the time. And the rest of the time, we're getting it in with varying equity that at minimum is going to be 36% and on average is probably going to be significantly higher. So this is just a situation where I think a lot of players do flat because it's comfortable. They get to see what happens, they get to see how the flop rolls out, and then they make decisions from there. But I don't think this is the best spot to. I'd much rather attack, let Zachu know that he's not going to be squeezing every single time that I open there's a caller and he just decides to go wild on it. I want to shut that action down. And again, I don't mind getting it in, and yes, sometimes I'm going to get it in, I'm going to be against kings, and it's going to suck. But it is what it is, it's built into the whole equation. So don't fear getting it in and gambling a little bit, right? You'd actually be surprised the times you do get it in, how often Zachu will show up as something like pocket 10s, or maybe something a little bit lighter, or maybe you go up to something like 750 here and he decides to think that there is any semblance of fold equity and makes a shove with whatever nonsense he has. So a lot of players just play too nitty in these situations. And yes, folding is too nitty, but I think always calling here and avoiding stacking off with anything other than exactly queens plus or exactly kings plus is doing yourself a disservice. Okay, so I'm just going to breeze through the rest of the hand because we do end up calling. Chicken Dinner decides to fold. Go heads up to it. Hero decides to check call on this flop, and this is a flop where I would just check raise and get it all in. Now, if we think about it, we got to this flop with a little over 2 SPR, so I'm kind of already in a commitment mindset as is, and I'm also thinking that Zachu could have things like 9s, 10s, things like that I'd like to get it in with, and I'm also cool if I shut out his equity if he has something like ace king or ace queen. But again, all that's kind of taken into consideration when I think about why I like to 4-bet at preflop as opposed to just flat it. So in this scenario, Hero decides to go for the check call, and again, all the check call does is allow your opponent to actualize his equity on his terms, and you're putting yourself in a situation where you're probably going to check call down a lot of the time anyway, but you're just allowing Zachu to improve with things like ace king, ace queen, and even possibly slow down with something like 10s if, say, a bad turn card rolls off or a bad river card rolls off. So as played, the turn goes check check, ace on the river, and Hero decides to check call. Now, Hero ends up winning this pot, and that's all well and good, I guess. But this is one of those where, when you look at Zachu's line, squeeze preflop, c-bet flop, check behind turn, and then drill it on the ace, I think you're going to be looking at ace king, ace queen a little bit more often than you want to. I don't think that he's going to check the turn behind with overpairs and stuff, and thus when he drills the ace, it really looks like something like ace king, ace queen that looks realistic. Now, yeah, at the end of the day, we won the pot. That's all well and good. And again, the fact that you see this kind of hand means that the squeeze range was probably wider than you originally thought. And again, there's even more validity for 4-betting at preflop. Chances are when you 4-bet, he probably actually goes away. And that's okay. You're picking up $5 on contested preflop, can't complain about that. And you're being more and more aggressive as opposed to constantly playing on your heels by just flatting anyone else's aggression when you don't have exactly queens plus or exactly kings plus type stuff. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. Tadeas, thank you very much for the great hand, and if you or anyone else has a poker-related hand or question, feel free to send it to me directly at splitsuit.com/send, and if you have any comments or questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you back for another video, and in the meantime, good luck out there, and happy grinding.